I think we can get started. So you had your exam today, this morning, which I'm sure is what you were kind of focusing on, as opposed to maybe the muscular system chapter, which is what is scheduled that we will begin this week. This is the 9th week of the semester already. And we've got the second half of this week and all of next week devoted to the muscular system, which is chapter 10, I'm sorry, chapter 9 in the textbook. And then beginning next week in lab, we sort of start from scratch in terms of beginning the material, which is also skeletal muscle structure and learning some of the muscles of the body. We'll be doing that next Wednesday, the 31st, and then that following Wednesday, the 7th, we continue on with 2 more additional exercises, learning muscles of the body, and then we have a respiratory organs exercise as well. So what I'm saying is we're nicely dovetailing the topics in lecture and lab. That was, of course, by design, and I think it's working out pretty good. So just like we learned the bones in lab and not in lecture, same thing's going to apply in lab for the muscular system. You'll be learning the muscles, some of the major external muscle groups in lab, and not learning those in lecture. We're focusing in chapter 9 primarily on some of the anatomy, more microanatomy of the muscle, and then some of the physiology related to the muscular system. We're focusing mostly on skeletal, but we do talk a little bit about smooth and cardiac, which you remember are the other 2 types. So I'll again open it up for questions. Anything you'd like to ask about, whether it's lab stuff or lecture stuff?
So I guess I was listening to you, but I just in the textbook, what are we doing next in the textbook? Sorry, I just got them all.
We should be, if you're following the schedule,
right, the joints of the skeletal system.
We had that listed for last week and the first half of this week.
Right. Okay. I just meant, okay. I just wondered what page I should be on, I guess.
Well, the muscular system chapter starts on page 292.
Okay, I got it. Sorry.
Yep, 292. And so, as I've probably said before, I think if I were you, I would really make an all-out effort to stick to a schedule.
I got it.
Specifically, this one.
Got it.
You know, we're all busy with our lives and other classes, and I get all that. But you know, as best you can, stick with this. Try to stay up with where should I be in what chapter by the end of this week. You know, plan ahead. Try to organize your busy lives. And I just think that's a good way to go. Now, again, I know you've been studying for the exam, so maybe you haven't even started muscular system. Maybe you haven't finished up the joints chapter. You know, I don't know. I can't read your minds. I don't know what's going on, but if there are questions or topics you'd like to go over, we can certainly do that. The Zoom lectures are all uploaded, ready to go for the entire course now. I think I told you guys that. So everything from here on in, if you're one that likes to look ahead, move ahead, you can certainly do that.
I didn't do anything in the joints chapter yet.
Yeah, okay. Just be careful not to get behind the 8 ball, and you're gonna want to try to, you know, just be aware of when we got quizzes coming up and and that kind of thing. Luckily, we don't have another quiz and lecture until the 7th of April, so that's a while away. Same for, other than the practical next week in lab. Well, that's what you're focusing on now is the lab practical stuff.
Yep, so the lab practical stuff, because I didn't show up for class, I just left. So that's 9 through 18.
Yes, it is 9 through 18. Exactly right. Yep.
In the lab book.
In the lab book, right? So it starts with connective tissue, and then we have muscle and nervous tissue, and then we got into the integumentary system, and then a whole bunch of bone exercises, and then we wrapped up with the joint structure and movements last Wednesday, and the knee replacement video. And I told everybody today in class that you should definitely be looking at procedures A and B in exercise 18 and be familiar with those joint movements outlined in the diagrams and in tables 18.1 and 18.2. But I did say you could omit inversion, eversion, protraction, and retraction. Those particular movements you don't need to know what they are, nor do you need to know the diagrams that correspond to those specific 4 movements. But the other ones you should be familiar with. And I will simply say you can go into the chapter 8 Zoom lecture that I've got posted, and I go over all of those joint classifications. I go over all of those various joint movements. So really reviewing chapter 8 in the textbook puts you in good shape for exercise 18 in the lab book. They're virtually identical. I would say less detail in the lab stuff. But if you first saw joints in lab exercise 18, it's a little bit confusing. But if you looked at chapter 8 stuff before 18, then it's like, oh yeah, I heard about that already. So since we have the practical coming up next week, remember the room and the lab, well, same thing. Is open Monday and Tuesday if you want to go in and review the bones and the models. We had some time today after the lecture exam. Some people stayed and did a little bit of review. I also want to not forget to tell you, as John had indicated, we're starting with connective tissues, which is exercise 9 in the lab book, and also muscle and nervous tissue 10. There were some slides associated with especially 9. Yeah, that I specifically failed to mention today in my brief comments about, review. But there were a whole slug of connective tissue slides on that sheet on tissues. So don't forget about those slides.
So those slides are in the course shell under. Oh, there they go.
No, the slides are in your lab book.
Oh, okay.
And you made hopefully sketches of those when we went over those. It was a long time ago. It was back to the 24th of February. It was literally 4 weeks ago. Yeah, but Freya was holding those diagrams up. Yeah, those photographs rather from exercise 9, I think. Yeah, and they're good. They're excellent to look at. But like I told you guys at the time, don't sit home and study strictly the diagrams or the photographs solely. I mean, these are good. Do not get me wrong. They are nice sketches, not sketches, nice photographs, blah, blah, blah. But if you can't recognize a particular tissue at a station, and it looks a little bit different from these perhaps, and I would say a lot of them are real super similar, but there's some that are just a little bit different. That could hurt you. So don't over rely on this. This is good stuff. Don't dismiss it, but get in there and maybe look at those slides one more time. you made sketches, I think, that day. I think I put them on the micro video system. We didn't have time to sit down and maybe go through them in as much detail as I would have liked, but we did get through them. I know that. So anything you want to talk about with respect to the practical material, we can talk about that. Or
I have a question on the practical. I don't know if you've written it already or not, but I feel like I'm spending probably too much time trying to memorize all of the different, fossas and condyles of the bones and the, skull and everything. And I feel like I'm probably spending too much time on that. Is that going to be like a big portion of it, or?
Well, if you look at what exercises the practical covers, which we said was 9 through 18, of those, of those 10 exercises, 11, 12, 13, 14, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, 10 exercises. Of those 10 exercises, 1, 2, 3, 5. 5 were bones.
What did you start
So-
at? Sorry. What exercise did you say?
9 through 18.
Okay.
But I'm saying of those 10 exercises, half are on bone identification, as Paige was talking about. In other words, there's going to be a real emphasis on bones and condyles and fossas and all of those terms that we spent 2 weeks meticulously going through. And I know it was a slug. I know that. I get it. But I think I said to you guys, before that second onset or second rush of terms, I said, try to get the skull down comfortably before we get into the rest of the axial and all of the appendicular. Remember that? So you got to be hitting this stuff repeatedly. If you see it once or twice, it's just not going to stick. And so that's why I'm like, to the point of, I hate to keep repeating myself, but I'm going to say it for the 15 millionth time.
Come to class.
Babe, just remember me doing this, okay?
That's insane.
I mean, it's just the way you gotta do A and P. It just is. The people that do well in this lab do that. It's as simple as that. This is not anything beyond hard work, some tears, a little bit of blood. That's all you need.
Miss sleep and hunger.
Of course.
Don't forget that.
No, I don't believe that, John. I know you like your food. As do I. You can always have an orange while you're studying the bones. Or a candy bar or whatever. Plenty of sugar, keep you awake, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Paige, I mean, you just gotta get in there and do it. Slug it.
No, that's okay. That's
Yeah.
totally fine. That answered my question.
Yeah. The other thing that I have also suggested in years past, and it's harder to do with COVID. This is the dilemma we're in to some extent, although you guys could still do this. I used to tell students, hey, get together with 2 or 3 or 4 other people that you're on the same sort of the same level of devotion, if you will, to the lab or wanting to do well in the lab.
Work
And
ethic.
you get together and you say, I will do 4 practical questions on the skull. Paige says that. John says, I'll do 4 practical questions on exercise 15, vertebral column and thorax. And Sadie does 16 and Freya does 17. And so you all come up with 4 or 5 questions that you put together like I would. Get a skull out, put a piece of tape and an arrow pointing to something, and you know the answer to those 4 questions. You put that out. So now you've got 20 stations, right? You each do 5 or 4. Well, then you take your own little mini practical. There you go. If you do well on your little mini practical, you're going to do fine on mine. I mean, it's stuff like that that you could do that would be kind of fun. It's fun to work together if you're all on the same wavelength, if you will. It's not going to work if you get somebody who sits back and wants everything spoon-fed and is unwilling to put the effort in. I mean, that's the reality of some students, and that's just the way it is. And there are others that are going to really say, okay, I'm gonna pick some harder ones and still on the list, and see how we do. Or make a mix of easy ones and a little more challenging ones and put them out there on a practical. Or it's just one way of learning it. Or you get some of the connective tissue slides out and everybody does one question. And then you've got to ask the question. You've got to know, what the central canal of the osteon is. And you put the pointer there. That's your question. Name that structure. Or identify this type of tissue, and you cover the slide with a piece of paper towel or whatever. Just like I would do it. You do it. See how you do. Yeah, just an idea. Doesn't mean having to get together and say, okay, we're going to meet on Monday at 11 o'clock in the bio lab or the classroom or whatever. So it does require a little bit of, coordination and such. But I will say that the majority of those structures on that multi-page sheet, which was 11 through 17, I think, or 14 through 17, yeah. It's great to use the diagrams, try to find them on here, but then come into the class and find them on the real McCoy. Sometimes it's not quite the same thing. Diagrams are great, but there's no substitute for seeing the actual structure on a real skull. Are there any problems finding different structures on the bones? Or, I mean, we could go through that list again if you wanted to do that, or through some of them if there's still questions on, like, what is this? Where do I find that?
So like two things that I get messed up on is the scapula and then the hip, just like looking at it, like just from like the different angles, I like lose like sight of it, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
And like knowing the like coronoid and the acromion, yeah, coracoid and the acromion,
Sure.
like, yeah, so like
Okay.
that, and I guess the ischium and the pubis on
Right.
the hip.
Okay.
And the ilium, pubis,
Yeah.
ischium.
Ilium, ischium, pubis. Let's pull up the bone skeletal system PowerPoint, because in that PowerPoint will be all those diagrams and those photographs of the bones.
I got so many bones. I got bones.
You got 206, John.
Yeah, and I got 206 pages of bones.
206 note cards, huh?
Yeah.
You got the right scapula, I got the left scapula. I got the right,
the entire thing, and then in 3D too, right?
When I was a kid, and I'm waiting for the PowerPoint to load, honestly, so I'm not like trying to kill time, but I am. My brother, who was 10 years younger than me, my folks bought him something called the Invisible Man. And it was this model. It was about 20 inches tall, and it had an outer clear component, which was supposed to be the skin. And then it had like a mini skeleton, and it had all these organs. He had to paint the liver and the stomach, and it was a learning thing, right? Well, this was all put together, and I remember as a kid looking at that and thinking, wow, this is really cool. The body, the ribs, and all the bones, and they were like multi-layered. It was really interesting. So go on eBay, Invisible Man, buy it for your husband or wife. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. You're just like, really? Well, your kids love this stuff. Kids eat this up.
I have like 4 of those at my house, but they're dinosaurs.
Oh yeah, right, dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are great. Stegosaurus, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Velociraptor, right, all those? Okay, so Sadie was asking about the scapula. Do you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So differentiating the acromion process and the coracoid process, I agree, can be confusing. The way that I remember the difference is I find the spine, which of course is this, which comes off the broad flat component here of the bone. You all know what I'm talking about. And if you trace that spine, it terminates in this acromion process. The big, it's the bigger of the two processes, right? And you can kind of see how the acromion process right here on this view of the pectoral girdle is articulating with the clavicle here. Okay, so and then in terms of the coracoid process, as you look at the bone with regard to the glenoid cavity facing you, here's that larger acromion process that we traced from the spine, and then the other process is by default the coracoid process. It comes right off of the glenoid cavity, which is where the head of the humerus fits to form the shoulder joint, right? So I don't know, Sadie, that's what I do. I find the spine, trace it up to the acromion. Now, can we come up with a mnemonic to remember that? Let's see. Make a word out of this.
So one thing that I use for it is I think of like acrobats use their shoulders a lot. And then so the bigger one is acromion and then the other one is coracoid. I don't know, it's silly.
Yeah, great.
Or if you just touch your collarbone, right? That runs right off of it.
Right. Right. It's funny how we remember things, but Paige, I get a sense that you do that a lot. That's how you learn a lot of these different concepts, and that's how you can recall it, right? That's what we all should be trying to do. Come up with ways to remember things, making up stories, whether they're empty school buses carrying electrons or something silly, right? But it's not silly. It helps you remember. And then the other bone that Sadie was asking about was the coxal bone, which of course is part of the hip, right? So here we see the two coxal bones articulating with the sacrum. We have this very structure in the lab, 2 of them, 2 real ones and 2 plastic, I think. There's a female and a male pelvis. So we're going to be looking at one of these 2 coxal bones in this diagram. And we remember that each of these coxal bones, or sometimes they go by the name innominate bones. Some books just say hip bone. Your book just says hip, is really composed of 3 fused bones, shown here in the cream, green, and orange, right? Ilium, ischium, and pubis, respectively. And I agree with you in that I often, to be quite honest, have a hard time. I have to stop and think about, well, ilium I can find pretty easily. That's the broad flaring, superior most component. It's easy to find that. You shouldn't have any trouble finding the ilium. But the ischium and pubis, like which is which, right? How do I tell which is which? Well, the way that I try to differentiate is I will look for this ischial spine, this bump that comes off the greater sciatic notch of the ilium. So if you can find ilium, you can find this notch. It's just super easy to find. And then just carry that notch down and know that you're coming into then the ischium. and you'll find that spine, that little bump below it. Now, how far do I extend the ischium before I hit the pubis? There's not a joint, or not, there's not a suture here, like there, say is between the temporal and the zygomatic or something like that, where I could see definitely, well, this is where the bone ends, this is where the next one starts, right? There's not a suture. So the way that I try to remember is I go to the center of the acetabulum, which is the ball, or the socket here that fits the head of the humerus, or femur rather, in the hip. And I draw an imaginary line from the center of that acetabulum through the obturator foramen, right through the middle of it, boom. That is my delineation, if you will, that tells me where the ischium ends and where the pubis then begins. And if I want to know where the ilium and ischium end kind of back over here, I would go around the notch, and just as it begins to kind of straighten, that's where I draw my other straight line back to the center of the acetabulum to sort of define the entire ischium here in green. So there are these sort of imaginary lines you have to draw from the center of the acetabulum. That's really, I think, the way to remember this. And then in terms of the pubis, you remember the line you drew right here between ilium and ischium, right here? Well, draw another imaginary line in the opposite direction. Boom, that's going to tell you pubis. And actually, this tubercle, you can find this. We didn't put this on the list, by the way. So if you're like thinking, I didn't learn a pubic tubercle, no, you didn't. We didn't add that. But you can find this if you look for it and feel for it, because it's at this pubic tubercle that a piece of fibrocartilage lies here in the symphysis pubis joint. Okay, you can see that is somewhat roughened zone here where
So,
the fibrocartilage would be.
So like, is there some movement between like the ischium and the pubis, and between the ilium and the ischium? Like,
No.
where does the
no.
like, when women's hips get wider, where does that expansion come from?
Well, it happens at the symphysis pubis joint down here,
Okay,
down here.
just there?
Well, you could possibly have some. I don't think this sacroiliac joint is movable. This is considered fairly immovable, but during childbirth there is some give.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just read that it can expand up to like 30%. I just sort of was wondering.
Where did you read that?
In a book for pregnant women that, yeah,
Oh.
if you're not laying on your back, because they say, you're not supposed to necessarily be on your back, that your hips can expand actually, and your skin can stretch more than it does when you're on your back. And it said both of them 30%.
Oh, that's interesting.
I actually read it twice. I could probably find where I read it.
Yeah, that would be interesting to, for the authors to put into this part of the chapter, because that is kind of interesting to know.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
The other thing, as long as we're talking about, movements of the pelvis during childbirth, the other thing that I mentioned, I think, in class was the fact that if you look at this arch between the male and the female has a more broadened angle here, as opposed to the more the smaller angled pubic arch for the male. And this again is to allow for childbirth, basically.
Is that really the only difference, or is like there a difference in like the top, the flared area or anything?
Oh, I don't know. I would not be surprised if there are other additional anatomical differences within the pelvis too. I just know that this is often cited as a
Right.
very noticeable difference. Now, if you had just this bone sitting around, you found that in the woods somewhere, right? You and I probably couldn't tell whether this came from a male or a female cadaver, deceased person, right? But a forensic pathologist could look at this and tell you in a millisecond whether it was a male or female. 'Cause
Really?
they could just tell by having worked with them, right?
And the angle right there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You and I would have to, have some tables and some some diagrams and some protractors or some other machines to kind of do the math.
Right.
And that's fine. That's how you learn it, right?
Right.
Um, so Sadie, you mentioned scapula and hip. Are there any other bones or anybody else have other bones you want to, look at specifically, since I've got them right here?
Could you touch on the, oh gosh, the axis, in the, oh
Sure.
gosh, what's the next one down? The vertebrae?
Yeah.
Because I feel like, I think I got that one wrong on one of the quizzes is, what caused that to be able to move and that kind of stuff.
Sure. Okay, so let's see, I'm looking for the diagram that shows both. Okay, so here we've got both the atlas and the axis shown in these three sketches. The topmost sketch is cervical vertebra number 1, called the atlas. It takes on just a very unique shape with a large vertebral foramen, because it's here that the brainstem is transitioning into the spinal cord. So it's a little bit larger in size, and therefore you need a bigger opening, right? By the time you get to the second cervical vertebra, the axis, notice how the vertebral foramen shape and size has really changed, right? It's a pretty significant difference in shape. And actually from this point down into, well, all the way down into the lumbar, it maintains this somewhat oval orientation, the foramen does. Although we've said that the spinal cord loses its solid architecture by the time you get down to T12 or T13, or not T13, there's no T13, T12, L1, the cauda equina begins to form between T12 and L1, actually. So the atlas also has these large superior facets that are going to articulate with the occipital condyles of the skull. So if we go back a slide or two, or 3 or 4 or 10, remember the occipital condyles of the skull. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Let's go to that diagram right here. These aren't shown very well. Well, yeah, you can see them here, right here. Those structures right there on either side of the foramen magnum, those condyles are going to articulate with the superior surfaces here of the atlas. Okay. The axis, or C2, has this unique vertical protrusion called the dens, or odontoid process. So this lateral view shows it nicely. This superior view is a little more difficult to see its vertical prominence because we're looking down from above. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Okay. And so this dens fits up inside the foramen, which is one reason why it's got this unique shape to it. Because not only do you have to have, the brainstem extending down, you also have to have the dens sticking up into this opening. And you can see a little bit of cartilage right here. This white represents cartilage. So that when you go to turn your head, when you pivot, you undergo that pivot movement, what did I say happens?
The atlas stays still against your skull, and then the axis is the one that moves.
Just the opposite. The atlas, this one, moves with the skull. Because remember, this is attached to the occipital condyles.
Okay, well, that's what I meant. Like that one's like stuck to your skull, and then
Yeah. But okay, so the axis doesn't move. The atlas moves. The axis and all the other vertebrae stay in alignment. They do not move. Because remember, you got this ontoid process sticking up inside here. So when you go to move your head to the right or left, this ontoid process doesn't move. It stays stationary. This bone pivots around it.
Okay.
If you like, I've had like, well, like yoga teachers and stuff tell me about like throwing, like that you're not supposed to put your head back like fast or hard. My grandson does this because you can like break the tip of the the axis off. Like, is that like really a concern? Like, I seem like throwing your head straight back like that, vertebrae sticks straight up. Do you know what I mean? It's
Oh, I think I know what you're getting at. If you might fracture the spinous process.
yeah.
I have never heard that. I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong
Yeah,
or
it's like
false,
something
but
I heard a long time ago, and I watch him do it all the time, and I just wondered if, if that was anything, that I should be.
well, it's kind of like you hear people pulling their fingers so it pops the joints, right?
Yeah,
I don't know that that's something you should be doing all the time,
it feels.
but people do it. And they're not like dying prematurely because they do it or anything like that.
I mean, but our vertebrae, like, they have to have some movement though. I mean, because we can like twist our bodies,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's slight movability, absolutely, within the vertebral column. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There's movability. I'm not saying there isn't. Absolutely, there's some movement, but this is not going to be as movable, obviously, as other joints are going to be. But yeah, you've got to have, as you swim, as you walk, as you run, as you do any physical activity, you got to have some movability. Sure. Yoga, great example, right? What's the other common Chinese exercises? What do they call them?
Tao Te Ching or something like that.
Oh,
no.
I'm talking about Tai Chi.
That's yes, I did know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Because you have, remember, between the vertebrae, you've got fibrocartilage. We've described that before, right? The intervertebral discs. And while we don't think of them as providing a great deal of flexibility because they have a lot of collagen fibers, they're known more for their strength, but there is movement, some movement going on there. How about other questions or bones you'd like to look at?
So I just had like a weird question, I guess. So like with owls, how they can like turn their head like all the way around. So how does their axis and atlas work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You'd have to look at the anatomy to get a real appreciation of the fact that they can turn their heads not completely around, but almost. I don't know the actual angular movement, if it's like of the 360 degrees, right? They could do 270 or something. It's something like that. It's amazing. There's only one human I know of that comes close to doing that, and that's Linda Blair. You know Linda Blair? Ask your parents if they know Linda Blair. And they're going to be like, who? Well, if I said, have you ever seen the movie The Exorcist? Linda Blair can do that. She's very, very flexible. That's a funny movie that dates back to the 1970s, but even today, 50 years later, it is one of the scariest movies.
I literally got on a kick one night and watched that and the Poltergeist, and they are
They're scary.
And the style of acting is so different then too,
Yeah. But it's interesting, owls especially have evolved the skeletal structures to provide that particular degree of movement. Or if you think of a cheetah, for example, running on the Serengeti after a gazelle, you've all seen, footage of that, slow motion footage, and they say the cheetahs can get upwards of short bursts, I think upwards of 70 miles an hour. Well, think about the connective tissue, the muscle, the skeletal systems to provide that ability. It's phenomenal. It's really interesting. Yeah. There's a course you can take in college. It's an upper level biology course called comparative anatomy. And they used to have it when I was in school. And you literally looked at a diversity of animals and you compared the anatomical features so you could better understood why, a cheetah ran the way it did, or why the owl can turn its head as it can. And you find those very same structures on you and me, but they're modified on these other animals because they've evolved the need to modify those. It's very interesting.
Sounds awesome.
It's really cool. Yeah.
You don't know for sure if they offer it anymore? Or?
Oh, I'm sure. I haven't. I just don't get into those upper level courses ever. I don't teach them. But if you just Googled, like maybe UB or University of Pennsylvania, State College, Penn State, whatever, bio, you'd find comparative anatomy still offered, I would think. Yeah.
I'm just trying to make it through this one.
Yeah.
So like, if someone has like arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, is that actually, I guess, does that affect the connective tissue and the bone? As far as like deteriorating it?
Yeah, I mean, if you think back to that movie we saw last Wednesday on the woman that had her knee replaced, right? That rheumatoid arthritic disease. She had rheumatoid arthritis, which the physician was describing as an autoimmune disease, as opposed to osteoarthritis, which is due to wear and tear and age related. So in rheumatoid, and maybe to some extent even in osteo, although I think that's more bone specific, but it's joints. Yeah, those disease processes can begin, within a joint, destroy the connective tissue there. And by definition, bone is a connective tissue, as is tendons, ligaments, cartilages. They're all connective tissues.
Right.
So yeah, I think you can definitely have multiple connective tissue involvement in many of these diseases.
Okay, I was just reading some extra stuff I had, and also was an Ehlers-Danlos. That's that affects the protein in the collagen. I was reading.
Oh,
so the joints are real loose, but then it also, I thought this was great. It also affects like your sphincters too.
I'm not sure where to go with that.
No, yeah, most people haven't heard of it, but I'm just interested.
Well, there are a ton of interesting, disorders, diseases that after you've taken A and P, you're going to be much more knowledgeable in understanding what they're saying when they talk about stuff. I mean, you're learning so much. You guys really are. You're learning a ton of stuff. When you stop and pause on May 12th when the end of class and you think back, what have I learned since January 27th when I started? It's a lot of stuff. You won't remember 5% of it, but you've been exposed to it. So if you hear a term or you read something, you're going to be more able to understand it, which is the whole goal of school.
I swear, like taking this 20 years ago, I always ended up being like the campsite nurse just because of this class, when no one else was there, like literally.
Yeah, you took a real interest in it.
I fell in love with it. Yeah, like literally 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. Any other bone structures you want to look at? I've got, again, the PowerPoint pulled up.
Can you go over the humerus because I feel like it's kind of the same between the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle.
Okay. Yes, yes. Let's go to the humerus. Okay. Do you see that on your screen? Okay. So, let me grab my terminology sheet here. All right. And let's see how many diagrams we have to look at. Okay. We'll go to this one. This does a nice job kind of comparing and contrasting the anterior and posterior surface of the right humerus. So we'll go down through the list of different structures we need to look at. So obviously the proximal end, that which is closest to the shoulder, that fits in the glenoid cavity of the scapula is here. That's the head, right? And then we've got greater and lesser tubercles. And Maeve, was that the terms you just mentioned a moment ago?
Yeah.
Okay. So the way that you probably can easily distinguish between the two, generally something that has the word greater in it is going to be a more pronounced structure and lesser, less pronounced. So the greater tubercle is somewhat more proximal, I would say, than the lesser tubercle. And as I said a moment ago, it's also just kind of larger. It's more easy to identify. There's a bigger, bump, if you will, to the greater tubercle than there is to the lesser. Not that the lesser doesn't have a prominent projection, it sort of does, but the greater is just more noticeable, I would say. And by the way, these tubercles, as is the case for many of these various structures on long bones, they're acting as attachment points for muscles. And so you really should get a humerus out and you should be able to distinguish between those two if you just look kind of close. We also, so Maeve, does that help?
So you mean the greater one will be bigger than the in the
Yes.
yeah.
Generally, the greater is bigger. It's easier to find. It's larger in size. You can feel it and see it. It's just more noticeable.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see remember the bone, the real bone on the lab. I just looked through the picture, so I see it may be the same.
You know what? Let me run down and I'll grab a humerus. I'll bring it back.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I don't know if it's just in this picture or not, but the greater tubercle is actually ends higher on the humerus, I think. As far as the round part, Maeve.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at the top, if you're looking at the top of the bone, I'm pretty sure the greater one ends higher on the bone.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and honestly, if you're looking at it going up and down, the lesser one's on the left. Or no, it's not. I don't know my left from right. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, and the beneath area is kind of different to remember too. It's a lot of structure over there.
Yeah, there's a ton.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if I hold this kind of behind a white background, maybe you can see it a little bit better.
Oh,
Can you guys see which is the greater and which is the lesser? It look exactly like on the diagram. I'm holding it in the same position. See it? So
yeah,
here's the greater right
yeah.
here, and then here's the lesser right here. And I'll turn it so you can kind of see. See the lesser, it's obvious if you look at it, it's prominent, but it's a little bit more, I don't know. It's not the same, it's not as proximal as the greater is. The greater is closer to the head.
The head.
Yeah, I think that shows it pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
sure.
Down there.
I should have brought all the whole carts up here right now. How about any other bones? Oh, did you want to go over more of the humerus, or were those the two structures you wanted to see?
Could you go more like the beneath area, the distal
Yeah,
area?
sure. So, okay, so we're back to the two now. You see it?
Yeah.
Do you see my arrow or not?
Yeah, I can see
Okay.
it.
Okay, great. The reason I ask is I've got two screens going on, and I'm not sure which one of the two you're seeing. Okay. So as we then go from the greater and lesser tubercles, we encounter what's called the anatomical neck, which is kind of between the tubercles and the head. And then just below that, maybe a couple centimeters, is a region. It's not so much a specific structure like these tubercles you can point to and see them. The surgical neck is more of a region. And what did we say about the surgical neck? Do you remember? Well, it's pretty
Isn't that
obvious.
also called the metaphysis?
It is the metaphysis region, that's true. But why do we specify the term surgical neck? Remember me telling
Is
you
it
why?
because it's broken more frequently?
Yes, exactly right. As Paige said, it tends to be a site where fracture is more common in humerus breaks. Yeah. And then we extend from the metaphysis region, which would be where the surgical neck is located, into the diaphysis, and we see this neck structure called the deltoid tuberosity. And I'll again try to hold this bone up. And although it's a little bit hard to see, if I hold it at an angle, you can kind of see this little, like a little flaring out of the diaphysis.
Also the spine.
And it's just a little.
We can't see your camera.
Okay. How about now? Can you see it? Can you see me? All right. So here's the deltoid tuberosity over on the right side. It's just, see how it kind of just flares out a little bit, extends out from the diaphysis just a tad. And so that is the site for the deltoid muscle to attach to the humerus. The deltoid is your large shoulder muscle, which you'll be learning about next week. Okay. Then we come down to the distal end of the humerus, where we've got the capitulum and the trochlea. This describes, and notice that this is in white. Do you remember what the white indicates? Whenever you see kind of white here, what does that tell us? What kind of connective tissue do we have here?
Hyaline.
Right, hyaline cartilage. So here we've got the ulna and the radius articulating, especially the ulna. with the distal end of the humerus to form the elbow joint. So the trochlea has a much different appearance than the capitulum does. The capitulum is very rounded. I always kind of think of the letter C. It's kind of curved. The trochlea is more edged, like a letter T. When you write a T, it's more perpendicular, if you will, not so much curved. And so there's more of a cutoff to the trochlea in terms of overall shape. The coronoid fossa, a fossa is a little depression, right, here in the bone. It's the smaller of the two. The olecranon fossa on the opposite end here, or not opposite end, but on the posterior view, we can see it's much more of a developed structure because it's here that the ulna, right, the olecranon process of the ulna fits in. Here's where the coronoid process of the ulna fits in. When you go to full extension, when your arm is straight out, then the olecranon process of the ulna fits into the fossa. When you go to flex your arm, bringing the hand closer to your shoulder, that's flexion, then the coronoid process fits into the coronoid fossa of the humerus. And I think I told you guys you could omit the epicondyles, right? Don't worry about those.
Do you know what the root for like coronoid and coracoid, like what that cora root means? Like I just think that might help us, remember some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Corac, C-O-R-A-C, corac, like coracoid, literally translates the crow's beak. The crow's beak. So if you look at the scapula.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's a Latin derivation. Let's go back to the scapula for a minute. Okay, let me share my screen. Do you guys see the scapula? Yeah, okay. Trying to get a good view of this here. Okay, well, remember we talked earlier about the coracoid process extends off of the glenoid cavity as opposed to the chromium process that comes off the spine. So just think of crow's beak when you see this, like a beak of a bird. So a crow is a big black bird we have around here. And it has a very pointy, large beak to it. Do you know what I mean, Maivei, by a beak?
No.
Okay. Come on, guys, help me. Beak.
Like a bird's nose and mouth are together, and it's like a hard structure, sort of, Maivei, and they, eat worms and kind of opens and closes, like, I don't know, but it's hard. And it kind of looks like this process.
Yeah. If you look on page 201, there's a section in each chapter entitled Understanding Words, and it has many of the prefixes defined.
201 on the textbook?
Yes, in the textbook. If you have your textbook, look on page 201 at the top.
Yeah.
Understanding words. So you can look up the prefixes, and maybe that helps you get an idea of what the term itself refers to. And actually, that's a really, really good idea. I remember taking anatomy in high school, and the teacher having us take weekly quizzes over prefixes and suffixes. Every week we had a quiz on prefixes and suffixes.
I mean, you can break down words, you know, even the root word is Latin. If you figure out what the root word and the prefix and the suffix, affix, all that, it can help you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, probably a book.
Yeah, actually, I'm sure you haven't planned it, but I'm taking medical terminology right now too. And you and that professor match up almost perfectly, and it's been really helpful.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
That's Jeannie Johnston, isn't it?
I'd have to look. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it is. I've had her last semester or a couple semesters ago.
Yeah, I think it's Jeannie. Yeah.
We have that class at JCC too. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's called medical terminology.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the title of it?
Yes.
And what is MED? Is that the prefix of the course? MED? Yeah. So Myve, go online. I don't know if it's MED or what's.
It's
You can look it up in the
HIT 1410, and my professor is Angela Honig.
Oh, yeah. That's Jeannie's daughter-in-law.
Yeah, I had Jeannie.
HIT, what was it again? 1410?
Yes, 1410.
So Myve, go to the chat, and I typed it in there. Okay.
Oh yeah, I see that.
Yeah, Angela Honeck is the teacher. She's an adjunct. Her husband teaches at UPB, and Jeannie Johnston's is her mother, not her mother-in-law. Did I say mother-in-law? It's her mom.
Is this class online or is
I don't think it's online, is it, Paige and John?
Yep, we don't do Zooms or anything. It's just you read the book and then take quizzes and things like that. It's all self-taught online.
It's in class. Yeah, I had to do it in class.
It might be offered face-to-face as well. You could check it out in the fall offerings. I'm not sure if it's offered in the summertime, but yeah. Well, good. I'm glad you're having a good experience with that.
I will, thank you.
Yeah. Other topics, questions? Bring your book with you next Wednesday for lab to have as a reference. Definitely bring your book, textbook. Okay, well, listen, I'll stay in the Zoom room for another 10 minutes or so. If you have any questions, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, I will see you next Tuesday in review. Right? Okay, well, have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, sir. Have a good week.
Thank you.
You too.
Thanks.
I'll see ya.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
So actually I worry about the exercise for look at the connective tissue when go to the microscope. So can I make appointment with you on Monday, like, and then I can go to the lab and we can look at the slide on microscope.
If I was coming into work on Monday, we could do that, but I don't come in on Mondays. Um,
About Tuesday is fine too.
well, I do have some time Tuesday. Let me tell you my schedule. Let's say I have microbiology lab from 11 or from 8:30 to 11:15. Then I have A&P review from, oh, what is it? 11:30 to 12:20. And then I have some time between 12:20 and 1:15. And then from 1:15 to 2:30, I have microbiology lecture. And then from 2:40 to 5:25, I have another lab. So my Tuesdays are very, very, very busy. I have just a small 45-minute window.
But you don't come in on Monday?
No, I don't. That was why I was hoping today after the exam, if you wanted to look at slides or if you had questions, that would be the time to ask those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because after the exam, like sometimes I'm very tired, and
No.
today I didn't read the book with me. So yeah, when I say the exercise, we have the connective tissue, and it's very far until now when we learn about that.
No, you're right. It's been a month ago we looked at that. You're right. It's been a long time. What I would suggest you consider doing is, the room is open all day Monday and also Tuesday. If you can get in there and look at the slides and compare those various slides from the list, you have the slide list, right? You have the slide list from class.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Exercise 10. Slide 26, 29, 27, right?
Right. I can't seem to find my handout, but you have it in front of you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you should go back and look at what notes you took or any sketches you made that day. I don't know if you made sketches. Did you try to draw any pictures? No?
Just only draw the nervous.
Aha. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
That's the only one I draw it down.
You did the neuron. Okay.
And then neuron.
Yeah. I think what you have to do, what I would suggest you do is go into the lab, that you have your microscope, that you look at the slides on the microscope, and you compare those to these photographs rather, in exercise. This is exercise 9. This is connective tissues. Right? You have these in your book.
Yeah.
So you can, I think if you take your time, you can find these structures. And if you're having real problems, then we can get together sometime between 12:20 and 1:15.
Yeah. It's after the review.
Yes.
Right.
It's between my A&P review, end of the review, and my microbiology lecture at 1:15.
Okay. So I think I will come in on Monday and look through all the slides. And then if I still have questions, I will go Tuesday to meet you on the class between 12:30. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Yeah, try to get in there and look at them though on Monday beforehand. That would be a good idea. It would be good. The other thing that you could do, if you feel comfortable, is to reach out to you know, some other people in class and say, hey, would you like to get together on Monday to meet in class and look at the slides? You know, Sadie or John or
I think
Paige.
Raya, she always on the lab Monday and Tuesday. I have her number. Maybe I will text her.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
I would suggest you consider doing that because they might like to review too. And like I said in class today, you could set up a little mini quiz, each of you, and help learn the material that way too.
So on the lab exam, you will ask about like stretch the tissue, like we write it down and label them.
Well, I would probably ask you to identify what kind of tissue is being viewed through the microscope. Where would you find that in the body? Where, you know, the classic example is, you know, what is the tissue? Where do I find it? And what does it do? What's its function? Kind of, you know, go back and look at the chapter 5 on tissues and lecture. That's another thing you could do is you could watch chapter 5. I think it's chapter 5. Yeah, chapter 5 tissues in lecture. The lecture exam, recording.
Yeah.
You could go and watch that before you come into lab on Monday. That would be a very good review.
Yeah.
But if you have their phone number and you can text them, whose name do you have?
Raya.
Freya.
Raya, yeah.
Yeah. Or you can go into Blackboard, right? And you can email Sadie, John, anybody. I think you can do that. You know how to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would do that. I would see if you can get together a little study group. They might welcome being invited. They might say, okay, yeah, let's do that Monday at 1 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever.
Yeah, but I remember you have the office hour on Monday, right?
I have Zoom.
Or Zoom.
Zoom.
Oh.
Yes, Zoom office hours. I do have, yeah. So if you want to talk Zoom, we can do that too.
Yeah, what time for your office hour on
I
Monday?
think from 10 o'clock until, let me look, it's on the syllabus. You can look it up on the syllabus.
10 to 2.
10 to 2:30.
Yeah. Like I can come in anytime, like because you open on Zoom, or I have to schedule appointment.
I would
before.
like you to let me know when you want to meet. So I'm not waiting here for 5 hours for my day to show up.
Okay. Yeah.
So you tell me, hey, can we meet at 10:30 or 1 o'clock or whatever? And then I'll meet you. We'll meet in this room, the same room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will text you before Friday to see if I need meet you.
Email me.
Email you. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, that's all my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'll see you later. Anything else?
Yeah. No. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're welcome.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.